This video is made possible by my patrons on Patreon. Hello everyone, my name is Ziamaro and welcome to Battlerite Sage. So today I'd like to talk about a champion who's been struggling for viability since her release in March. Despite numerous buffs, Jamila is still a hard champion to justify picking in almost any situation. As with any balance issues, there are always multiple routes you can take to address the issue. So with that in mind, here's a quick disclaimer. These are my thoughts on how we can fix Jamila. As I said, there are always a few ways you can go about balancing a champion, but this is just my personal opinion on the matter. The gameplay in this video is actually from my teammate Spino. He's a really great Jamila player and he does stream, so if you want to see more Jamila gameplay, I'll leave a link to his stream in the video description. So first off, let's quickly talk about why Jamila was released in such a weak state. Now this is just speculation really, but as far as I can remember, and bear in mind I didn't play all the way through early access, but almost every champion has been quite overtuned at release. The two exceptions to this though are Alicia and Jamila, and I'm wondering if this was a conscious decision to be a little conservative with their balance. Everyone who's played since the free-to-play launch knows how ridiculous Destiny, Xander and Ulrich were at launch. I guess you could argue that a champion being very strong at launch is a good business decision, because people are more likely to buy them if they're really overpowered. But I don't think that's Stunlock's mindset. I get the feeling that they put competitive balance first, which is why we see some undertuned champions like Jamila and Alicia at launch. I guess it doesn't really matter why they released her so weak, but it's worth thinking about for future champion releases. Personally, I'd rather a champion was released slightly on the weak side rather than having meta-shifting strength like Ulrich did. A perfectly balanced champion would obviously be preferable, but it's kinda hard to get that right from the get-go. So, with that out of the way, what is the issue with Jamila? Let's start out by ruling out what seems to be working with Jamila. I think that her left click damage is pretty decent. Her ability to trade in melee range is pretty good thanks to her EX mouse too. Not only can it heal her for quite a decent amount, it also applies Weaken. Weaken is kind of becoming an all too present debuff in this game, but there's no denying that champions who have access to it can trade really well. The actual effects of her space and EX space are great. An ability that can in-cap multiple targets with no energy used is incredible. There's a lot of counterplay to her space, but I think that's a wise balance decision. Like, imagine if you couldn't counter or block her in-cap. Jamila would be able to create some insane pressure and momentum straight out of the gate. So I think mostly it's a good ability. There are a few issues with her space that I'll get into later though. Her counter could be a bit of an issue. The value she actually gets from the counter being hit is pretty good. A short duration immaterial, stealth and some okay damage isn't too bad. However, she is quite reliant on her counter being hit to get the most out of her. I mean, that's kind of true of all champions with a counter, but she's kind of like Rook in that sense. Champions like Freya obviously want to get their counter hit, but they can still achieve stuff if it doesn't get hit, like whiffing your counter isn't the end of the world for Freya. For Rook and Jamila, getting your counter hit is the difference between doing a decent amount of damage and just instantly dying. So I'll come back to the counter in a bit. I think her E ability, Hookshot, kind of just does what it says on the tin. It's a decent gap closer, it does a bit of damage, and it can root your target if you take Momentum Strike. It can also be used to disengage in a pinch. Similarly, her R ability, while it's quite telegraphed, has huge value when you hit it. Personally, I think this ability is pretty decent, especially when you hit it on an in-capped opponent. So those are the things that I think are working with Jamila, but she still falls short. So let's move on to how we fix Jamila. So straight away, you might have noticed that I mentioned all of her abilities except one. Some of her abilities might need some small tweaks, but they all have redeeming qualities. But there's one ability that is so useless that I can't even think of a good thing to say about it. So did you notice which ability I missed out? Well, yeah, her ultimate of course. Jamila's ultimate is hands down the worst ultimate in the game. There are other bad ultimates for sure. Jamong's ultimate, for example, has a lot of ways to counter it, but if you manage to land it, it is pretty strong. Jamila's ultimate is thoroughly mediocre even when it doesn't shoot you in the foot, which it often does. In the last patch, her ultimate's cast time was reduced slightly, so it's become a bit of a meme in the community that all the buff does is allow you to suicide faster. But why is it so bad? Well, first of all, it triggers all counters, shields, and all that other nasty stuff that you normally want to avoid. If you don't believe me, try throwing your ultimate into Raigon's parry. Just see what happens. Go on, I dare you. Secondly, all it takes is one mobility skill to move out of its range and pretty much totally negate it. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, mobility negates a lot of ultimates. But consider the fact that Freya can use her ultimate on you when you almost have your space back, but she'll still do full damage to you. It doesn't matter that you almost have your space back. If Jamila ults you and you almost have your space back, she'll maybe do 18 damage to you, but then you just space away. There are other champions with mediocre ultimates, such as Shifu. Shifu's ultimate has the same problem as Jamila. You can mitigate a good amount of its damage quite easily. Shifu also can't use other abilities while he's spinning, but his ultimate does have a few redeeming qualities, such as not being counterable and giving him a shield while he's spinning. But those facts aren't really what makes Shifu better than Jamila. Shifu has a really strong base kit and EX abilities, so he can just avoid using his ultimate altogether if he needs to. But I think everyone can agree that Jamila's base kit is nowhere near as strong as Shifu. There are some champions who have a really strong ultimate that actually contributes to their viability. Let's take Esmo for example. He's a champion who often has to use his only iframe to pressure the enemy. Once Esmo's space is down, he's very vulnerable to AoE damage and CC. And once his shield is down as well, he's pretty much toast. If Esmo had Jamila's ultimate, he would be kinda trash too. But he doesn't have Jamila's ultimate. He has a really strong ultimate. In fact, it's so strong that it's had to be nerfed multiple times recently. So that kind of gives us two routes to fixing Jamila. And genuinely, I don't think it's just a numbers problem. In my opinion, there are two ways to fix Jamila. One is to tweak her base kit significantly, and the other is to totally rework her ultimate. If I were to just rework her base kit, I would suggest making her space either automatically go to max range, or make the minimum space distance longer. Her space is her only reliable iframe, and the whole point of using an iframe defensively is using it instantly to dodge something. The minimum dash distance is really short, so if you're not already near a wall, the iframe is incredibly short. Increasing the minimum distance, or just giving it a flat distance with no charge, could help with this. Personally, I think just increasing the minimum distance is the way to go. The second thing I think could be tweaked is her counter. The total damage you can get out of Jamila's counter is actually pretty good, but it's easy to avoid. In total, her counter can do 36 damage, which isn't bad, but all it takes is one cleanse or iframe to negate the delayed 22 damage. One option would be to front load some of that damage and reduce the delayed damage. So you could do 18 damage on the first hit and then 18 delayed damage. The other way you could go is leave the front loaded damage the same and change the delayed damage to a damage over time, so you can't just fully negate it with one iframe. And finally, you could actually make her hookshot an iframe. This would make it very similar to Shifu's javelin, but it would give Jamila one extra way to avoid damage. Just for the record, I don't actually support making those changes necessarily. I'm just saying it's an option if we want to go the Shifu route and make her base kit strong and just forget about the crappy ultimate. But here's my favourite solution. Just give her a totally different ultimate. I do still think the minimum distance on her space should be increased even if we do rework the ultimate. But giving Jamila a strong ultimate would make a big difference. If you didn't already know, Jamila is loosely based on the Stalker from Bloodline Champions, which is Battlerite's spiritual predecessor. And in Bloodline Champions, the Stalker's ultimate was really nice. It's worth mentioning that her space was actually an instant shadow step in BLC. So here's how the ultimate worked. You activated her ultimate, and you shadow step to the target location. Your next left click did 50% more damage-ish, and successful hits reset your space ability. So you could teleport in, left click, teleport to another target, left click, and so on. If you attack the same target multiple times in a row, it would reduce the damage done, but attacking different targets reset that. So you were kind of encouraged to spread the damage between different enemies. The ultimate lasted for 8 seconds, and honestly, it was a really strong ability. In Battlerite, Jamila doesn't have an instant teleport on her space, but what you could do is make her ultimate teleport her to a target location. You could skip the first 2 attacks in the Mouse 1 combo and just do 16 damage straight away. Successful hits would give you a recast on your ultimate, and you could then teleport to another target and repeat. If you made the ultimate last long enough for maybe 4 or 5 recasts, you could do somewhere between 64 and 80 damage during the ultimate. That's not an absurd amount of damage because you would be able to counter or iframe each left click. But the best thing about that kind of ultimate is the survivability it would provide for Jamila. Jamila is definitely lacking in iframes, but so is someone like Rook, Alder or Blossom. The difference is, each of them have an ultimate that can give them an iframe. I know that sounds stupid, but I think it makes a big difference. Another idea that people have thrown around is to leave her ultimate as is, but give you a recast so you can swap places with your clone. This would also give her an extra iframe and some mobility. So, as you may have gathered, I think the best solution to fix Jamila is to just totally rework her ultimate. We could rework her base kit and leave the ultimate alone, but I think she would kind of end up looking like a different flavour of Shifu. What we would change about the ultimate is kind of up for debate, but I genuinely think giving her ultimate an iframe would make a big difference. As I mentioned at the start of the video, these are just my opinions, so feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more Battlerite guides, news, and discussion. If you'd like to help support the channel and get some unique rewards, then head over to patreon.com/battleritesage. And don't forget to check out twitch.tv/battleritesage. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.